Hello.
Hey,
How are you?
good. How are you, Martin?
I'm doing really good. Thank you so much for coming on to the Check Your Head podcast.
You're welcome.
I am a big fan and grew up with your music. So thank you for all the wonderful times and all the wonderful memories and singing at the top of my lungs to You're Still a Young Man and So Very Hard to Go, and also like the new album, Step Up. But let me first tell you about what the podcast is about and kind of what we do. It's called Check Your Head Podcast, Mental Help for Musicians. So it's all about notable musicians like yourself, talking about mental health stories, experiences, and most importantly, your solutions on how to get through really tough times. And I know that after so many years of being with Tower of Power and just like keeping the band together, you must have some really wonderful stories of survival and, thriving in the midst of some really difficult times. And that's like all the great wisdom that is going to help our listeners, especially like the young musicians that are up and coming, that would love to have like a long and successful career like you have. So,
I'm ready.
Okay. All right. So no questions.
From me, for one, I have a question to you. Are you from the Bay Area?
You know what? I am from Pasadena. I'm in Los Angeles, but my daughter is in San Francisco. She went to college and is living there. And my other daughter also went to UC Santa Cruz and lived in San Francisco, but now she's in Portland. So and San Francisco was like my parents' favorite city. It was like their romantic city.
It is a great city. I was in the East Bay in the Bay Area for 20 years, and then I was 15 years in Los Angeles. So I know Pasadena really well. And then I wound up here in Scottsdale for 26 years. I grew up in Detroit, though, till I was 11 years old.
Oh, okay. Well,
so if you add up, you could tell I'm really old.
Well, you look great. And hey, you still have like such incredible passion for your music. And every time I hear, you play the saxophone, all that emotion comes out of your saxophone. And, I really thank you for that, because that is what really touches the audience, right? That like incredible music.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I don't consider myself a very good sax player. I just play parts. I don't solo, and that's why I have Tom Pollicher playing lead tenor sax, because he's an excellent sax player. But my instrument really is the band. I'm a band leader, and after years and years of doing it, I've become pretty proficient at facilitating great musicians to work together. So it's like a fabric. And that, to me, is what really speaks to the audience, is the cohesiveness of Tower of Power, the tightness and the passion that we play with.
Well, that is such an incredible social skill, to be able to create this unity, especially when you've had, so many members that have kind of come and gone through Tower of Power, along with members that have stayed for 52 years and have been like the rock and the foundation of the group. I mean, how do you keep that unity, and what is the whole mindset?
Well, you're correct. I mean, I've hired and fired countless great musicians, and some have quit and left to go on to other things. And I'm proud to say that I have a good relationship with every one of them, even today. All these years later, I stay in touch with all those guys, and they're all great friends, and I have very cherished memories of all those musicians that went in and out. And, people ask me that question all the time, what is it that helps you keep it all together? And my patented answer, these days is God did it, I just showed up. Because the first 20 years of my career, which we'll get into a little bit later, I made every mistake I could possibly make. But God had a different plan for me. And around 1988,
yeah,
I was brought to my knees behind addiction to drugs and alcohol, and I got sober that year. And then within a year, my partner Doc, whenever he shares at any recovery meetings, he always likes to say, "I'm glad Emilios here tonight because he made my life a living hell the last year of my drinking and using." So I leaned on him pretty hard after I got sober, and a year later he got sober. And I think that, the two of us being the main members of the band, getting sober and setting that bar for sobriety and a spiritual path really sort of set the direction of the band for the next 30 years. And, along the way, learned a lot of things in sobriety.
Well, I'm so glad. Thank you so much for admitting that and talking about it, because so many other musicians and people in general are also, have fallen into addiction for whatever reasons. What do you think led to your addiction?
Now that I'm on this side of it, I can look back and, I know a lot of the triggers that drove me. But, when I started to drink and use, it literally was like a light switch went off. The very first time I drank and used, I drank everything there was, threw up, passed out, said I'm never going to do it again. And then a year later, Doc actually showed me how to drink rum and Coke and smoke pot, and we started to write songs. And then I learned to control all that and keep it going. But I mean, even from the first time that I got loaded with him, I wanted to do everything there was, and start again the next day and do it all again. And I did that. Literally, I blinked my eyes and 20 years went by. And along the way, different types of drugs, and pretty soon hard narcotics came in. And I can tell you my story. It's a progression for sure, and but if I look back on it from this side, being sober a lot of years, I realized that I had abandonment issues.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was 14, I fell in love with this beautiful girl. I mean, even my father was like, "You did good, son," and then out of the blue, we broke up, and it really devastated me. I remember my brother sort of comforting me through that. And then, at the time, I think I was not quite 16, but, in my relationships throughout my life afterward, whenever I would be in a relationship and it would break up, I would have those feelings, that I got that first time when we broke up. And when I was 17, just before I turned 18 years old, I had the band. Doc was in the band. We were aiming for the Fillmore West. I was serious,
Right.
And all of a sudden, my mother says, "We're moving to Detroit." My parents had financial issues all their lives. And so one of the main reasons we wound up in the Bay Area was because back in those days, if you had a lot of bills, you could move to the other side of the country and the bills were gone. There were no computers or nothing like that, so that's what they did. They moved to the Bay Area and they lived there for a few years, and pretty soon they had a lot of bills again. I'm 17 years old. I'm really, passionate about this band that I have, and they say, "We're moving to Detroit." The next thing I know, I'm, and I'm an immature 17-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
I had never lived on my own. I had never had a job. All I did was play music, and next thing I knew, they were gone. That's right when I started to drink and use, and I stuffed those feelings down with the alcohol and drugs.
Well, that's like the really important information, is that a lot of addicts, they say that the drugs kind of help them stuff the emotions that they don't want to deal with, which, sounds like the easy way. But oftentimes, just like you said, they said, "Well, I lost 10 years of my life," or I lost this. But you eventually have to deal with those emotions, because that's really the foundation of the issue.
I work with a lot of recovering alcoholics and addicts. I sponsor them. And I always tell them, God will get your attention. It will happen. And that's what happened to me. That's the other thing too. Looking back on it, as I say, after being sober 32 years, I can look back and one of the things I hear people in meetings say, when I was out there, I was high, I was drunk, I didn't know what I was doing. I always tell them, I always knew what I was doing. I always knew what I was doing. I knew I was not living right. And I had a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. And the way you deal with guilt and shame when you're an addict and alcoholic, you drink more and you use more to stuff the feelings down once again, And one of the things I used to say, I always believed in God, but that's not true. I didn't believe in God. I believed that he existed. And I knew, and I don't know where I got this from because I didn't have a religious background, but I knew I was going to have to face him and sort of, admit all the things I'd done. In other words, stand in front of the judge. I knew God was a judge. I didn't have that all formulated in my mind, but I knew that, God existed and I was going to have to face him and that I hadn't been living right. I had this shame and this guilt. And so every time that thought came in my mind, it's just like stuff them feelings down by using drugs or alcohol.
Yeah. And what were your drugs of choice? What was?
I started on alcohol and marijuana, but what happened for me is I started when I was not quite 18, and at 21 years old, I woke up one morning, and we had been drinking all night, me and Doc, writing songs, and I woke up, I had a really bad stomach ache, and I drank some Pepto-Bismol, and it's getting worse, and pretty soon it's like I just took the bottle of Pepto-Bismol, I drank the whole thing, and the next thing I know, I'm on the porch. This is in East Oakland. We lived in the ghetto at the time, and I'm on the front porch, bent over the wall of the porch, throwing up all this pink Pepto-Bismol and screaming in agony, and Doc got me to Kaiser Hospital in Oakland, and I was in there, and, and they're asking you questions, and I just started screaming. I was in excruciating pain because my pancreas was inflamed.
Oh my gosh.
Pancreatitis.
Uh-huh.
And I went, they hit me up with some Demerol and I passed out and came to, like a day later, and they said, you have pancreatitis. And I remember an older woman coming in my room with a blue book and her saying, son, are you having a problem with your alcohol? And I looked at her like this is a Jehovah's Witness or something. I said, get out of my room. I don't want to talk to you. And, I didn't think of myself as having a problem with alcohol because I thought I drank better than all my friends. I could drink a great amount of alcohol and not throw up and pass out,
Isn't it funny, though, how that's like a badge of honor? Where it really shouldn't be, but people are like, I could drink you under the table or I can drink all this alcohol and that makes me more of a strong man or something.
Or even women are like, they like to say, I can drink a man under the table and stuff, So yeah, that's typical alcoholic addict behavior,
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, I got hospitalized for pancreatitis, and they said, if you may or may not be an alcoholic, but you have a pancreas that says no to alcohol, and if you continue drinking, it could burst, it could turn black. We have to cut part of it off. You could explode while you're standing on the corner, and you'll just die. All these bleak,
right, scary things.
Yeah, and I left. I was a little upset, but in my mind, I'm justifying. Nah, not me. I could do it. And within a week, I was drinking again, and within a month, I was in the hospital again.
Oh.
Really painful, And then the second time, it's like, okay, like this is real, and I'm trying not to drink, but I only lasted about 2 weeks, and I'm smoking pot like a fiend,
Uh-huh.
And I drank again, and within 3 months, I was hospitalized again. After that, I knew I was an alcoholic because I couldn't keep myself from alcohol. And then what I tried to do is I got into all these other drugs, to try, I was doing recipes,
Mm-hmm.
like this much cocaine and this much heroin and a little pot for euphoria, maybe a bite of some acid to help me get, creative with songwriting. I'm trying to make a recipe that makes me feel like 3.5 drinks and try to sustain it,
Yeah. So,
but I'm doing this so that I
uh-huh.
don't drink, because every time I drink, I go to the hospital, and what happened is it never worked. Sometimes I could go long periods of time using these different recipes of drugs. But pretty soon I was addicted to heroin. I was addicted to the needle. I'm shooting coke, speedballs. I'm doing all this stuff. But I always went back to the booze. And every time I go back in the hospital with pancreatitis.
Oh.
So vicious cycle, 17 more years.
17 more years of.
Yeah, because I was hospitalized the first time. I had been drinking like 3 years. But I guess 15 more years. 15 more years. But what happened for me is towards the end, it all quit working. I was drinking again all day long, and I'm doing all these drugs. And I had money at the time. I was touring with a famous band and my band as well. I was making money, and I'm spending it all on drugs, and I'm not getting high. I can't. I feel.
You tapped out.
No, I'm not passed out.
No. I was saying the feelings of getting high from drugs or alcohol was not working.
Not working. I felt like I was in withdrawals. My eyes were running, and my nose was running, and chicken skin, and chills and sweats constantly. And yet I had drugs, so I wasn't withdrawing because I had drugs. It just wasn't working anymore. I had a real problem, and I was hopeless. And I got to the place where I accepted the fact that I couldn't stop myself. I knew I was an addict. I knew I was an alcoholic. And I knew I was going to die before I was 40. And I was 37 years old. And I knew that I was going to die. And I had this feeling I was going to make the papers and hurt everyone I loved. And I just had to accept it. I was hopeless. And what happened is I went into this treatment facility. And, I didn't go in there to find the 12 steps or the AA or NA program. I went in there to dry out. And I knew that after 28 days of sleeping and eating, they were going to push me out the door. I knew I was going to drink and use again, and I knew I was going to die. But what happened is I walked into a lecture on those 12 steps. I realized that day that there was something they do besides those meetings. I had gone to one meeting. I was like, hang out with these people and not drink and use, just shoot me. And but that day I saw this lecture on the 12 steps. I realized there's a way to quit drinking and using and not be miserable. I always thought that my experience taught me that whenever I didn't drink and use, I was miserable. But I learned that day that there's something they do so that you can stop and not be miserable. And I wanted it, and I never drank and used again. But I did every single thing they suggested, everything. And I've been sober now 32 years.
All right. So at that point, you decided to listen and take their advice. And it was almost like your way out, right? To saying that you could have a happy life. Because you were at a point where you were almost choosing drugs and choosing that, I'm going to die.
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't feel I had a choice at all.
That it was just going to happen.
Yeah, it was going to happen, and I couldn't stop it. And I just did what they suggested. They told me I was least likely to succeed. That's what they said in the facility. Those two guys. They said, you guys, intravenous users, the chances of your getting sober and staying sober are nil. And I felt like the death sentence had been proclaimed, But, I just, I got a sponsor. I started to work those steps. I read the book. I started to pray. I did everything that they suggested, and it's worked all these years.
Now, during this whole time, it was a long period of time that you were taking drugs. Who were the people that were trying to help you? Because I'm sure there were people, family, friends, maybe even your band members that were saying, did anyone really sit down and say, look, you need help?
Back then, there wasn't a lot of interventions and stuff like that. But, I remember when I was really strung out on heroin and living in the Berkeley Hills, and my wife at the time also was really strung out, and, my dad came over, and we were passed out in the bed, sleeping. We used to sleep in late, typical drug addict behavior, And there was a banging on the door, and I looked out the window, and I saw it was my dad. You can't say no to dad,
You will?
Came in, and he confronted me, and
Yeah.
he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to stop. What else am I going to say? But I couldn't, and I remember years later him telling me that, he felt like it was his fault that he allowed me to become so strung out and everything. I said, "Dad, there was nothing in heaven and earth that was going to keep me from doing what I was doing. I had to go until I was done,
Mm-hmm.
And, at the time, we bottomed out, left there, went to LA. We did what they call a geographic, you leave where you're strung out at and you go to a new place. Well, what do? You show up and you're still there,
Mm-hmm.
Fictions in here,
Yeah, right.
I went to LA and I just kind of changed seats in the Titanic.
Well, there was another band member, Rick Stevens,
Yeah.
who also got into drugs, and he sang, some of the classics that "You're Still a Young Man," and
Yeah.
he also had a drug addiction, and unfortunately ended up going to prison.
He killed either 3 or 4 people in a drug-induced, rage. It was over drug deals. This was 4 years after he left the band.
Yeah.
But, it looked good in the press to say Tower of Power, so we got all the credit for it. But, he did 37 years in prison, and he had more than one lifetime sentence. He was not supposed to get out. But he found the Lord in prison, and he truly did become a reborn Christian. And I remember when he got out, he called me, and I was concerned. Like you hear a lot about prisoners coming to Jesus, and and is it real? But he came out, and I told him, I said, "Rick, I want to give you the benefit of the doubt, but I need you to know something. This is your opportunity to help a lot of young people not make the mistakes that you made. And I really hope you do that." And he's like, "I'm going to do my best, man." And we let him sit in with us several times, and we became great friends. He used to call me, we'd pray together, and then, he helped a lot of people when he got out of prison, and then he got a little cancer in his, in the marrow of his bones, and he passed a couple of years ago. But yeah, it was a great success story of what the Lord can do for you.
Well, I saw the YouTube videos of when he came on stage, I think at Yoshi's in Oakland, and I thought that was so wonderful that you reconnected, and he was able to sing this song that, his voice was still amazing, and you guys all sounded fantastic. It was a very special moment.
The crowd loved it.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to note that he spent 36 years in prison, from what I read, but he found a purpose in prison, to be very religious and talk with other prisoners, and he also sang. And one thing they say, as far as when you feel really down and out, is to find the purpose, to find the purpose behind what you're doing, and having that, I guess, greater good be what keeps you going. And so it was really, like you said, a success story. It was really a wonderful thing that he was able to find that purpose, and then also continue that after he got out.
Oh, it was a beautiful ending to a tragic story, is what it was. When he went into jail, just before, when he was with us, he was a fabulous performer, and he was a great guy. When he first came in the band, he wasn't doing a lot of drugs because he wasn't officially in. we had Rufus Miller was our singer, and he
Okay.
was filling in for Rufus, who also had drug problems. But he had had a nose operation. Rufus did, and we needed back then. We were doing 5 sets a night, and Rufus had this operation. He couldn't even do one. So Rick was filling in. He was doing a great job, and he wanted the job. And
Uh-huh.
so he's doing everything right. But then, as soon as Rufus went off the deep end, and we let him go, and Rick became the main guy, then money came in, and the ego kicked in, and pride, and next thing we knew, his attitude was really dark, and I didn't know a lot about hard narcotics at that point. I was still early in my addiction. I didn't get into hard narcotics till after he left the band, but I realized that he was strung out, and I fired him like 2 or 3 times, but we loved him. We'd bring him back. But finally, one day he couldn't, or he wouldn't rather, come in to sing all the songs on the Tower Para,
Mm.
one with What Is Hit. That album was for him, you know. And I already knew Lenny Williams, and because I had let Rick go a few times, uh, I had asked Lenny to come in, but he knew us. We were friends. And he said, he didn't want to get in between that. He liked us both. But finally I called him. I said, look, this guy, he's not, we're not going to do it with him. And we hope you'll come in. And he finally did. And that's when Rick really got deep in his addiction. He was with another band for a while. I forget their name. But it was like 4 years. And then he went on that rampage. I was on the East Coast. And I remember I got on the bus. We were going out to Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody said, hey, man, did Lenny get in trouble last night? And I go, what? He goes, yeah, it was some kind of police thing. I go, no, what are you talking about? And Lenny got on the bus, Lenny Williams. I go, hey, man, what'd you do last night? He goes, oh, yes, I was just laying up with this girl. I go, yeah, any problems? He goes, what? I go, were there any problems? Did you have the police come over? He goes, no. I go, okay. By the time we got to Long Island, though, it had broke national news. And I called my dad. I go, Dad, how bad is it? He goes, it's bad, son. You're on every news program there is. And I'll never forget, he said to me, just remember this, son. No publicity is bad publicity.
Gosh. Well, that must have been a tough time for the band. Tough for you also to see your friend kind of go down this path.
Yeah, I mean, it was sad to see, but, as I said, we were already all sort of in our addictions as well. We weren't doing that type of thing, but, we were definitely caught up in the addiction. That was the thing in the Bay Area, and that was the music mecca at the time. And that's sort of what made the Bay Area famous in the mid-'60s and '70s. It's drugs, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's where
Right.
it all started,
Well, when you were in rehab, and it got to the point where you had to face your issues and emotions and all that. You were talking about abandonment issues. Was that the difficult part, or how was that for you to kind of like really dig deep and find out, why you were in the place that you were in?
To be real honest, I don't think I realized my abandonment issues until I was sober over 20 years.
Really?
No, I didn't even deal with them in treatment. In treatment, I did my inventory process, and I just barfed up all the stuff I was ashamed of, things that I had done that I was ashamed of. There were sexual situations and ethical situations and, greed and envy and resentment. And I wrote all that stuff down, and I didn't have to like scratch my head and go, what should I put? It was all there boiling for 20 years. It just came out. I was on a flight to Korea, 9-hour flight. And I just wrote it all out in like 2.5 hours, and went back and shared it with my sponsor. And he pointed out all these different character defects that were running like a thread through my life. And, when I was in my addiction, I remember just, being baffled. They say alcoholism, it's cunning, baffling, and powerful. I remember The last time I was hospitalized for pancreatitis in Santa Monica, my wife came in, brought my two little girls, and my little girl looked at me and she said, "Daddy, why are you in here?" And I had no answer. I had no idea why I couldn't stop myself. I knew it was killing me. I knew every time I drank, I'd get pancreatitis and the pain was excruciating. I knew it was wrong. I knew I had to stop. I knew all these things, but I couldn't. So I used to have this incredible shame and guilt, like, why can't I? My brother at the time, he had a son, and, they'd throw them all in the van and go to Disneyland. They lived like normal people. And I used to wonder, why can't I? Why? And what happened for me is I found out that, I have alcoholism, and they say ism, ISM, I, self, me. It's all about self-centeredness, self-pity, self-exaltation, self-righteousness, self-deprecation. And I never knew that. So all those years when I was going, why, I had no idea. But once I did the steps with a sponsor and wrote all that stuff out, and he pointed out my defects of character, and I became willing to give that stuff up and give it away to a power greater than myself, I started to realize, oh, this is why. These are the things in your life that are objectionable, that we need to cast aside and replace with things that are more positive, and it's a process. It takes a long time, but things immediately started to get better, and they've continued to progressively get better for over 3 decades.
So that was a positive process for you.
Oh, yeah.
Or was there a difficult part that was really uncomfortable for you? Because, so many people are going through that and they fear rehab or they don't want to go. But it's good to talk about like the positive changes in your life and how it made you feel, all of these great steps forward.
Addiction, like I said before, God will get your attention. The way he gets your attention is he brings you to the place where there's nothing that you want in your life more than to just stop living that way. I just want to stop. And it was like, I didn't care what I had to do. Years before that, when I didn't, when I wasn't quite as bad as I was towards the end, I just wanted to figure out a way to get clean and maintain a normal drug use, but by the end there wasn't nothing about that. I wanted it out of my life. It was not working. I was spending all my money on it. It was hurting everyone I loved, and my career was going down the drain, and I knew I was going to die. So I was just like, somebody tell me what to do, please. I'll do anything. And I think that's very important for any alcoholic or addict that is endeavoring to get clean, is that, you have to have that willingness. Like, you want it more than anything. I got to the place where I wanted to not use more than I wanted to use. I had a complete mind switch. And I take no credit for that. It wasn't like one day I woke up and became a good person. That wasn't the deal at all. It wasn't a matter of being a good or a bad person. I have alcoholism. I'm an addict. And what happened is, God, by his grace, decided to get my attention, cause a change in my thinking, and eventually come into my life in a powerful way. That also was a process. It wasn't like, oh, I believe in Jesus. It wasn't like that. For me, for one, I didn't want to hear about God. Mm-hmm. I did not, But one of the things about that 12-step program, they don't shove it down your throat. They allow you to find your way to a power greater than yourself. And what those people in LA told me, and they got great recovery in LA. I'm so grateful I got sober there. They told me, look for the people that have what you want and try their God on for signs. And, I was always good. My guys used to follow me around because I could always find the drugs. I was like a divining rod for drugs, and I used that same mentality, that addict mentality in the rooms. I could tell who had the good recovery. And they were all praying, and they were praying to God with a capital G. And I was like, I'm doing that. There are people younger than me, that were in the treatment facility, and they were like, well, I believe in the cosmos, and I believe in this tree that I really, or I believe in the ocean, and I was like, no, that ain't gonna help me. I need some supernatural, powerful being, and I couldn't put into words what that was at the time, but I knew it wasn't going to be nature. It was going to be God with a capital G. And I tried to emphasize and it worked, and I've been doing it ever since.
So why do you think God put you through this? Because, you were at the brink of losing your life, with the organ damage and so forth.
I don't look at it as God put me through it. God gave me over to my will. You can, God will try to get your attention here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you keep on saying, no, I want to do it my way, eventually he goes, I'm going to let you have it your way. And then you
turn it down, right? Okay.
And then, okay, I've had my way. I don't want to do it my way no more. I'll do whatever you say. And at first it's just like, somebody tell me, but eventually it became, no, it's this power greater than myself. And then the path starts, and then you need to figure out, okay, well, who's this God you believe in? Is it Allah? Is it Buddha? Is it, who is it? What is it? And I checked everything out. I read every self-help book, every Deepak Chopra, Emmett Fox, William F. Presnell, Scott Peck, the Course in Miracles, the Quran in English. I read it all because for one, I didn't want to believe in a Christian God, but as God would have it, I kept on going back to the Bible. That's the one that rang true for me. And then I check everything else out again, but I go back to the Bible. Finally, I just got to the place where, no, I'm parking here, and I got some people to help me with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important to figure out who your God is, But what happens is we tell God, well, my God is loving. We tell people, my God's loving, my God is kind, my God forgives me, But then along the way, I learned, well, God's also a judge, and he's righteous. And so he's got to judge evil. And, what kind of a guy, if he's perfect, it wasn't balancing out. So finally, I quit telling God who he was, and I let him tell me who he was. And he did that through the Bible, which I consider to be the Word of God. And that's just me. I don't want to stuff that down nobody's throat. Everybody's got to find their own path. But I'm grateful that he brought me to that place. And I continue to travel down that road daily.
Okay. Now, since then, since you've turned your life around, I'm sure you've come across people in your own band, people that you've worked with that are going through addictions, or maybe they need help. How have you used your experience to help other people in the industry?
I find the most effective way to make sure that when someone has a problem, they'll feel good about coming to you, is never to ever call them on their stuff. I live as an example in their presence. I'm sober in their presence. It's not that I don't talk about my sobriety, because I talk about it just like I talk about, I had some good breakfast this morning or whatever. I talk like a normal person, but I'm never like, you know what, man, you need to check this out, or, that stuff. Alcoholics and addicts, they don't want to hear that. But if you're just humble, if you just live your life sober in the sight of men, when the time comes that those men may need some help, they will come to you. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I do. I lead by example, not by preaching. That's not going to work.
That's a really good thing to say. Because like you were saying, people have to come to their own conclusion. And, everyone has a turning point when they let go and they finally listen to others that may have, gone the same road and have, changed their lives.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I've had to approach people about their drinking and using at different times, but I have a maxim that I go by, which my sponsor taught me. He said, if the way they're living is affecting your business, then it's not only your right, but your duty to let them know that they can't continue to do that. And so, for instance, if somebody is getting high or getting drunk and they don't show up for a gig, then as the leader of the band, it's my job to say, you know what, you can't do that here. You can drink and use on your own time, do whatever you need to do, but you can't miss gigs. You can't affect my business like this. And what I generally do is I say, look, that stuff has had its way with us. And so around here, they're not going to allow it. I go, I'm just the leader. I'm not like the dictator. They're going to make me fire you if you don't look at this, and I try to put it in that respect, like, allow me to help you if you will. But one thing you cannot do, you can't miss the gig, and you can't affect my business with your addiction.
mm-hmm. Now, when you were going through the abandonment issues, what was it that helped you? Was it counseling or a type of therapy, or was it basically just saying the words and admitting to it? Or what is it that really helped you kind of heal that part?
Kind of all the above, sobriety and recovery from addiction is a constant growing thing in your life. If you're really committed to staying sober, it's got to be growing, because alcoholism is growing every day. My addiction is growing every day. So I have to make sure my recovery is also growing. So as I'm in that process, I'm constantly inventorying myself. So I do what's called a spot check inventory. During the day, my mouth gets loose, or my attitude gets dark for a moment. I'll just have a little talk with God for a second and say, you know what, God, help me get back. One of the things I tell my guys, you can start your day over anytime you want, and you can start it over as many times as you want. And I do that all the time. But the other thing is, every night I do a step 10. I look at my day. What did I do that I could have done better? And so I'm always looking at myself, is my point. And I started to notice things about myself, and I did some therapy. I had some therapy years ago when I was divorced from my first wife, and a couple of years ago I was divorced again, and that brought up some issues for me. These are relationship issues, and I need to look at them. So I went and I got some professional help, two kinds: Christian, biblical professional help, and also a therapist. And in going to therapy, they always want to know, your past. And so I'm going through a lot of this stuff that I'm telling you. And it came up about that first girl who broke my heart, and also about my parents leaving me at the age of 17. And I had it was like a movie. I was talking through it, and I was standing in front of my sister-in-law's house. My brother and his girlfriend, they weren't married yet, but she was like a sister to me. And we were saying goodbye to my parents, and my little brother was in the back seat. And he was like, 8 or 9 years old. And we were his whole world, me and my brother Jack. And they're moving him to Detroit from the Bay Area. That's a long way,
Yeah.
And as they're driving away, we're all crying. And I see my little brother crying. And as I'm talking through this with the therapist, the feelings are just like, it's like, because I had stuffed them down for so many years, and then even like I dealt with a little bit, years ago in my first divorce, but then even all those 25 years later, I dealt with it again. And, it's like, I realized, what, I stuffed it down more again. And then I really started to look at that, and I sort of put a name to it, as it were. I said, all right, you know what? I have abandonment issues. I do. And I started to look at all my relationships, and I just realized it. And that was very helpful to me.
Yeah, it's funny how a painful trauma can really affect your relationships, and it's almost like those emotions need attention and the respect to really be recognized. And I think maybe once they're recognized and really looked at, that, maybe that's when the healing process begins,
Yes.
giving that experience the respect, and really just looking at it and thinking about how badly it hurt you.
I think it's an integral healing that's needed there. And you're right. It doesn't begin until you actually, unearth it, as it were. And that means let those feelings up. And I tell you, when I remember, a few times going through that, probably 3 or 4 times, talking through that and just crying, and just, it was like I had stuffed it down for so many years, and it was just like, it came out, and I remember leaving the therapist's office and just being tired, like when you're really crying hard and your emotions are just, emerging so profoundly, and I just remember being real tired, but it was helpful, and now I can see certain behaviors that are objectionable to me, and I can say, no, you know what, that is related to this abandonment issue, and you need to, make amends, and you need to change that behavior and right the wrong, and it helps you to live a life that's more pleasing in God's sight.
Well, I do think that emotions are the color of life, and all the emotion that you put in your music is, what makes people feel so good. And even, I'm sure, when you cried over that abandonment, that there's something about it that's so freeing, right? It's almost like letting it out to the world and letting it go. And it's just a great example of just really the beauty of emotions, and how important it is, to really respect them, and that there's strength in emotion. Because I do think sometimes, especially with men, that they do have a tendency to stuff down emotion that is hurtful, or where you should be crying. That's very painful, and that's a natural reaction to something that is painful.
What happens when you do that is it becomes like a regular thing, and so pretty soon you're like this stoic, hard person, and I see that in myself a lot. And over the years, many people have told me, like I used to work in Sausalito at this place called Record Plant. I did a lot of records there. And, I was friends with everybody there. I loved everybody that worked there. And I remember one time I was at a Christmas party, and a couple of the girls were talking to me, and they were saying, the first 2 years I know you, I thought you hated me, And I was like, what? Why would you think that, And she goes, because you'd be walking down the hall and like your face, and I tell people often when I share my story that I have an FU face, and my dad was the same way. I think I would get that a lot from him. And I've figured out ways to use that to my advantage over the years, but it's also been very disadvantageous in many ways, and I think that comes from, you stuff an emotion, and pretty soon you become this stoic, hard person, and I don't know that can ever be completely undone. It becomes such a part of your makeup, but it's just so helpful to acknowledge it and to be on a quest to deal with it regularly, It doesn't mean it goes away. You can put it in check, and you can just, acknowledge, all right, I got the FU face on, and there's no reason for that. Smile, man, and bring some joy into this person's life before you scare them away,
Well, you seem like a very joyous, very easily sociable person.
I can be, I got a lot of different sides to me, but we all do. You know.
Well, one of the things I was listening to the new album, Step Up,
Yeah,
and I love the theme behind it because it's like step up, don't give up, which
yeah,
is kind of like the whole idea behind the podcast too. It's telling your story, but encouraging people to persist and find the solution, whatever that solution may be, but just to keep trying. And once you do find what fits for you, whether it's for addiction or mental health or mood disorder, that really can lead to such a happy, healthy life. And that is what feels good, right? That natural high.
yeah. You know, they used to have a phrase in the recovery community in Los Angeles, really popular. You know, they would always say, get in the solution. Stay in the solution. When I share, I like to share the solution. And I was new in recovery, and I was like, I didn't know what the solution was. I was still learning. So I'd call my sponsor, and I'd say, I'd be telling him what's going on, and he'd say, well, you need to get in the solution. I go, I hear that all the time, Mike, but how do you do that? And he goes, quit thinking about the problem. And I was like, okay, but what do I think about? And here's the thing: it's like it's hard not to think about the problem, So you literally have to substitute something, and that's what I found in my quest for a power greater than myself was. That's what you substitute. Like I believe in Jesus Christ now. I'm a Christian, okay? But I haven't been this way for the last 30 years. At first, it was just, I believe in God, At first, it was actually, I believe in the group. These recovery people, I believe in them. But quickly I found out, well, they're people, though. They let you down. I need something more. So I started believing God. But it's like, when you told me about quit thinking about the problem, I realized, okay, you got to substitute something because your brain will just keep bringing it back, And so I start to think about God, and it worked. It worked. And then what happened was there was this interesting maxim that I read about it. They say, when you pray about something that's troubling you, and you're letting it go, and then you go out, I'm good, right? But then like 40 minutes later, it comes back, doggone it, well, and they say, imagine yourself by a fire and an ember flies out of the fire, it lands on your arm, right? What do? Do you let it sit there and burn out? No, you go like this. You brush it off so it doesn't burn you for a long time, right? And so that's what I used to do when I would pray about something and give it up. It's like I'd walk out, I'd be good. A little while later, my little alcoholic brain would go, but you know what, that's so-and-so, and I go, no, God already took care of that. And I brush it off, And I've taught that to a lot of men, it really works because our brains will cause us to go over something over and over. But if you've got a relationship, a vertical relationship with a power greater than yourself, and you give it to that power, then all you really need to do is just remind yourself, oh, that power has taken care of that. And sometimes you're reminding yourself of that over and over and over, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, you are a survivor, and thank you so much for sharing your story. I mean, 52 years in Tower of Power, what are like some closing words of wisdom for a musician who wants to have a long, successful career in music?
Well, I always tell guys with there's 4 words. I can boil it down to 4 words: live right, feel right, and that's it. If you're living the right way, you're going to feel good, and if you're not going to be feeling good. So that's the short story.
Mm-hmm. Now, with the new album, is there anything else that you want to say about Tower of Power, about Step Up, or even about mental health?
Well, as far as mental health, I will say for people that are early in recovery, we have addictive personalities, and so what happened for me was I started looking for all these other avenues to act out addictively. So one of the first one was food. And in my first year of sobriety, I gained like 100 pounds. And
Okay.
I've dealt with the food issue for years. I'm an overeater, and I went to Overeaters Anonymous and did that for a while. But it's an issue, and that's just your addiction is trying to find another way, another outlet. For a while it was sex. I was, having all these little, relationships on the road that I knew they weren't right, and I didn't feel good about them. And I talked with my sponsor about them, and they weren't going to fix me. And eventually, I got that in order. But your addiction will find all these different ways. It could be shopping, it can be working out, it can be positive.
Hmm.
You get addicted to like I'm eating healthy and I'm working out. I mean, whatever I do, I do to the max. So that's one thing I'll say about from a mental health aspect. If you're early in addiction, the thing to seek is balance. And that's an elusive thing. It takes a lot of work, but, we should have moderation and balance in our lives. And then as far as our new album, Step Up, I'm extremely proud of it. It just came out on March 20th. There's a lot of great messages in there, and there's certainly a lot of great music that will stir you emotionally and move you physically. You should be sweating after you dance to that record. And we
Well,
also have, we're in the process of finishing a 50-year DVD documentary. We
wow.
we did a live concert at the Fox Theater in Oakland, and we added 10 strings and 2 extra background vocals, and we had 7 horns that night, and a few Tower Power alumni played with us, and just fabulous. I've mixed 13 songs. I got 10 more to do, and then we got to tighten up the video editing and add some documentary material. But probably early next year, there'll be a TOP 50th anniversary DVD documentary.
Very nice. And you know what I just saw is you have something, it's called At Home and Social with Emilio Castillo on Access TV. What is that about? That's going to be coming up, right?
That's a TV show on Access TV called Top 10 Revealed. And I think it's today, actually. I don't know. I was wondering what it was, too, because, when I did it, they used the title of the show, which is Top 10 Revealed. And,
Ah,
yeah, and it's a pretty popular show. They have all these famous rock stars on there. I was kind of like, am I famous enough to be on here? Yeah. But it went pretty good, and yeah, I think it's showing today. So
okay. I'm going to definitely check that out. And yeah, Step Up had these great funk songs, the beautiful love songs. I could feel I could hear the jazz, and I could hear like all of the electricity behind, the songs like Step Up. And like you said, the messages were beautiful. The lyrics are beautiful. So again, thank you so much for the music and all the joy that you've given me. And I'm sure a lot of fans out there. I can't wait to to see you guys live.
me too.
Yeah. So after this whole pandemic is over.
Yeah.
But I wish you well. And now that you have spoken out on mental health, you are now a superhero, a check your head superhero. So that's anyone who speaks out on mental health and also supports the podcast. So I will be sending you a T-shirt to remind you that every day you are a superhero.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
I'll take an XL.
All right. I'll send one to you.
Thank you, dear.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. God bless.
Bye, Emilio. Bye-bye.